Hey everyone, welcome back. This is part 2 of the video on common mistakes that students make when submitting abstracts to national and international conferences. If you're new to the channel, my name is Rhanderson Cardoso. I'm a practicing cardiologist in Boston in the United States. And in the Meta-Analysis Academy, we talk about research, publications, systematic reviews, meta-analysis, and how these research experiences and publications will impact your career. If you like this content, make sure to subscribe. And also don't forget to check part 1 on this video where I talked about the first 5 mistakes. Now we're going to talk about mistakes number 6 through 10. Again, as I explained in the first video, this is a collection of experiences that I've had as a reviewer for major conferences like the American College of Cardiology, but also extensive experience in reviewing the abstracts of our students in the Meta-Analysis Academy and giving them feedback on how they can do better. So this is part of a pattern of mistakes that I've seen and I hope that you will avoid. So let's go on into mistake number 6, which is the incorrect use of abbreviations. So it's very common and useful to use abbreviations even in your abstract. For example, if you're doing an abstract in cardiology and you're talking about myocardial infarction, you could potentially abbreviate that and use the abbreviation MI instead of writing out myocardial infarction all the time. So what are the mistakes that you can make related to this? Well, the first one is the first time you use an abbreviation, you forget to spell it out. So it would be incorrect to just use MI the first time around. No, instead of doing that, the first time you use it, make sure you write myocardial infarction and then put parentheses and the word MI. And then the second mistake is once you've introduced an abbreviation, sometimes people forget to use it. So if the first time you put myocardial infarction, open parenthesis, MI, close parenthesis, every other time that you use myocardial infarction, you shouldn't write it out, you should use MI. So these are the 2 mistakes I see. First, you don't spell out the word the first time you use the abbreviation. Second, once you do that, you forget to use the abbreviation in future times. You have to use it every other time after you introduce the abbreviation. Mistake number 7 is a poorly structured measure of association. Now, this is a general rule that works for the abstract and the paper. You have to be consistent and you have to make things look pretty, look nice, look neat. For example, your table 1 can't be all over the place, too much text, or just disorganized. You have to be organized, consistent in how you present things in your abstract and your paper. And one place where that often goes wrong is when reporting measures of association. So let's say you're doing a meta-analysis and the outcome is myocardial infarction, just like I mentioned in the abbreviation sections. Myocardial infarction could be an outcome. You're comparing medication A versus medication B for the incidence of myocardial infarction. And let's say, for example, that medication A was much better than medication B. It really lowered the incidence of myocardial infarction. And then you're going to write this out and you say odds ratio 0.25, 95% confidence interval 0.13 to 0.46. P-value 0.02. So when you write these numbers out, you have to be really organized about it. Put them in parentheses, separate them by semicolon, and whatever way you do it in the first time, make sure you're consistent in the other times that you put other measures of association. So for example, sometimes I see the common mistake of doing semicolon between the odds ratio and the confidence interval, and then the other time the student writes an odds ratio, they use a colon or they use a comma instead of a semicolon. And sometimes they open parentheses and forget to close parentheses. And sometimes they separate the confidence interval by a hyphen. Sometimes they separate it by a comma. So it becomes really inconsistent and you have to keep it the same way. I really like this structure that I'm going to share with you guys here, and I suggest that you use it every time. Open parentheses and then put the measure of association, whether it's odds ratio, risk ratio, hazard ratio, and then you put the number, semicolon, 95% confidence interval, put the numbers separated by a hyphen, semicolon again, p-value, close parentheses. If there is a figure that you want to reference, you could put the semicolon after the p-value and put the number of the figure. So here's that in writing so you can really see how I like to do it. And if you want to do it different, that's okay, but just make sure it's organized and it's consistent every time throughout your abstract. Let's talk about mistake number 8, forgetting p-values or confidence intervals. Really, when we're talking about statistical inference, we look at those two things, p-values and confidence intervals. When you write your abstract, make sure to add both those things, the confidence interval and the p-value. You don't necessarily need to add measures of heterogeneity, subgroup analysis to an abstract. You can leave those for the paper. But the confidence interval and the p-values of the measures of association that you report, of your risk ratios, hazard ratio, odds ratios, you should really do that. Don't forget to add p-values and confidence intervals. So let's move on to mistake number 9, and this is one that you have to be particularly careful about because people don't often think about it. Mistake number 9 is swapping the order, changing the order of intervention and control when writing the results. Let's say, for example, you're comparing medication A to medication B. And let's say that the incidence of an outcome, myocardial infarction, was lower in medication A compared with medication B. So there are two ways you could say that. You can say medication A was associated with a reduction in myocardial infarction compared with drug B, or you can say drug B was associated with an increased rate of myocardial infarction compared with drug A. So you can say A lowers the outcome, or you can say B increases the outcome. Of course, I'm making an assumption of causality when I say that, but we're going to leave that discussion for another day. I want to keep things very simple here. A decreases event, or B increases event compared to A. So which one of these is correct? So the way to do this, and that's where the mistake occurs, is you should follow the order in which you built your forest plots, in which you calculated the measure of association. If in your forest plot, medication A is on the left and B is on the right, in other words, A is your intervention, B is your control, you should write it out in the text, A reduce the event compared with B, and not the other way around. So mistake number 9 is swapping, changing the order of intervention and control when writing it out in the abstract. This creates unnecessary confusion because if you write medication B increases the event rate, but then in parentheses the odds ratio is less than 1, both are technically correct, but it creates an apparent confusion. So avoid that by simply writing in text in the same order that you created the statistical analysis. So say drug A reduced myocardial infarction compared with drug B, and then your odds ratio is less than 1 and everyone is happy. The text agrees with the numbers, with the measures of association. Keep that in mind. And then mistake number 10, probably one of the most important mistakes, is exaggerating the conclusion. Is making the conclusion really overstated. It's really just saying that your intervention is the most amazing thing since sliced bread. So don't do that, okay? Just keep to the facts. Stick to the facts when you're writing the conclusion in your paper. Keep it very simple. All you have to do is restate your P-code question. You're going to say, in this systematic review and meta-analysis of patients with whatever condition, disease they have, whatever your population is, you can say what the outcomes were. You can say there were no significant differences between intervention and control for the outcomes of myocardial infarction, stroke, or whatever outcomes it may be. So again, very simple. In this population, there was no difference in the outcomes of this, and that when comparing the intervention and the control. Or if it's a positive study, if the intervention was better, you can just stick to the facts. Just say, in the systematic review and meta-analysis of population whatever, the intervention A was associated with a reduction in the outcomes of A, B, C, and D as compared with medication B. That's it. You don't have to talk about future trials. You don't have to say how this completely changes everything in medicine and this is really new and exciting. Just stick to the facts. That's the way to do it in the abstract. You can leave all those extra things, the implications, future studies that are warranted, you can leave that for the discussion in the manuscript, or for talking to people when they stop by your poster or your oral presentation in your abstract, in your conference where you will go. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, send me a message, send a comment with other topics that you'd like to see discussed here. And I hope to see you here in future videos of the Meta-Analysis Academy. Oh, don't forget to join our waitlist to join the Meta-Analysis Academy program if you're interested in learning systematic reviews and meta-analysis to transform your career. See you there. Bye-bye.